Hello, everyone, and welcome to the announcement and Meet the Authors event for No Snow Day for the Brain. We are all so excited to have you here and are so thankful for you joining us tonight. We're going to take the chance to walk through the book's inception and development, as well as the larger leadership framework and evidence-based theory in which this whole project resides. And it really has been quite the journey. This project was started, written, edited, and published all throughout the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And most of us never met in person until the project was nearly finished in the spring of 2021. We all learned so much by doing this project and are really excited to share with you today. You wouldn't know it by the illustrations, but Olivia had never even drawn something digitally before starting this project. So it really was a labor of love and of learning. But by learning along the way and always being open to try, we tried to live out the resilience that we hope this book can try and foster to you all. So to get us started, Velshana is going to share a few thank yous and begin us with our programming for tonight.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And if you look in the chat, you see people from all over. So thank you so much. I just want to give a quick thank you for our funders. If it wasn't for United Way, Beacon Community Impact, and Notre Dame Neuroscience Department, we would not be able to have done this project before. There's a lot we could share about what it took to get here. But just want to say thank you to our supporters and a special thanks to Dr. Nancy Michael, which you will get to hear later today, for her vision and for all of the wonderful things. So yes, thank our sponsors. All right, so we now have Karina.
Hi, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about what a self-healing community is. So in a self-healing community, people are taking care of each other and themselves in the way that the human nervous system expects. And so this is done by creating a community where people feel safe and loved and that they belong, and they have the resources and skills to respond to their needs and issues. And so our goal is to improve systemic and social problems by increasing our awareness of how our brains and our bodies function and how our actions affect each other, and through creating opportunities for the community to celebrate resilience. And so the Self-Healing Community Coalition of the Greater Michiana region today focuses on helping all citizens within our community build resilience, learn ways to heal from toxic stress through training, skill building, neuroscience and behavior resources, such as the book that we're celebrating today, which is so exciting. And one key piece of this model is distributed leadership. So it's not owned by any one organization, but owned by the community at large, with key organizations in the community serving as meta leadership positions. And so in our coalition, the meta leaders are organizations such as Beacon Community Impact, United Ways St. Joe's, and the Neuroscience and Behavior Department of Notre Dame. And so this is really unique because everyone has a role to play and is recognized as key players in building a self-healing community. And something particular to the self-healing community model here is the emphasis of neuroscience. So the scientific evidence surrounding neuroscience, epigenetics, ACEs, and resilience, which Dr. Michael is going to talk about in a few minutes. And since the Self-Healing Coalition is in a unique location next to the university, there has been the ability to have neuroscience students such as myself and Kate and Aisha and Rebecca and Alex, other peeps on this call, involved in creating resources and being a part of the movement. And so I have been working with the Self-Healing Coalition for the past year now, which is crazy that it's been a full year since I was introduced. And it has been one of the greatest sources of joy for me. I've helped create a manual to help organizations on their journey to becoming trauma informed. And I would not have been able to help with this without the beautiful support and collaboration of the whole team. And through this process, I have grown in empathy for myself and for the people surrounding me, because by understanding the neuroscience of trauma and our experiences, the work has dramatically shaped the ways that I process my own body's reactions and how I receive the people in front of me. Because so much of how we react and act are due to strong synaptic pathways that have been shaped by our experiences. And so by being more aware of my body's physiological reactions, I am much more gentle with myself and others because of it. And so I truly, truly, truly believe in the work of the self-healing community, because I've been overwhelmingly impacted by the support and the care from the people that I have the privilege to work with. Velshana is very intentional about making sure that we're taking care of ourselves and celebrating ourselves. And even just a few weeks ago, we had a large meeting with some of the student interns and self-healing community leaders. And I just wish I can articulate fully the immense joy and excitement that we had surrounding the momentum of this work. It was so beautiful. Like the next week I was living off of the high of that meeting. And so Velshana always says, like, in order to build a resilient community, we must have resilient individuals. And I really do believe this coalition is creating a new culture of resilience. And that is what makes a self-healing community.
Thank you so much. And now we have Asia.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. My name's Asia. I'm another intern. I work alongside Karina and Kate. So excited to be here. I'm gonna bridge some of what Karina was talking about to this amazing project that we're all here to celebrate today, specifically looking at the concept of PACEs, which stands for Positive and Adverse Childhood Experiences. So yes, we're sharing this slide deck here. And this is just a way that we can kind of focus our conversation on self-healing communities and think about the book. So what are ACEs? ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. You might be familiar with this. These are those early negative and potentially traumatic events that can impact children and the futures that they have, specifically their health and well-being. What you may not have heard of yet is positive childhood experiences. These are the events that promote successful childhood development, specifically through secure attachment and relationships with caregivers and fostering safe and stable environments. So when you put these two together, you can see that little math equation at the top, but basically ACEs plus PCEs equals PACEs. So this next slide is a grid that we put together in order to summarize the research behind these two concepts. So you have the large ACEs studies, which was published in 1998. It sampled a large population of people and concluded that these adverse childhood experiences correlated with mental and physical health issues later in life. The PCE study, which is relatively, it's more recent, was published in 2015. Likewise, it was a large population study. And here they asked 7 questions, kind of similar to the ACEs questionnaire, where they asked 10 questions. And these questions included kind of measures of support and community engagement and all of those positive experiences. And they found that this was also correlated with positive mental health outcomes later. Yes, and so the next slide will show us how do we connect these studies and this research and these outcomes with self-healing communities, and Karina's great introduction of what that means to us. So 3 things we have on this slide: increasing protective factors, building resilience, and supporting community engagement. I truly believe that No Sonode for the Brain works through all 3 of these concepts and what it does in supporting the bigger people in our lives and helping foster those important caregiver-child relationships, building resilience, educating on the neuroscience framework and bringing that information out of academia and into the community. And then lastly, supporting community engagement, allowing us to be in spaces like this where we can gather and really think about self-healing communities. So with that, I'll pass it back to Velshana.
And now what we're all here for, to meet our authors and illustrators. So if we can just go, and do you want me to call out your name, or you know who's, all right, so Alex.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Nisbet. I am signing in tonight from Madison, Wisconsin. Let's see, we all three graduated last year as neuroscience behavior majors from the University of Notre Dame. And I'll call on Kate.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Brown. I'm also one of the authors of the book. I graduated, like Alex said, in May 2021 with a degree in neuroscience and behavior. And I started working with United Way last September of 2020. And I'm currently working with United Way in a full-time position for self-healing communities. And in August, I'm heading off to medical school in Connecticut. So yeah, I will pass off the mic to Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Like they already said, I graduated from Notre Dame with a degree in neuroscience and behavior. And Belshana said we had 2 minutes to talk. So I was trying to think, what would I say about myself for 2 minutes? But I just wanted to say like why I've enjoyed learning about neuroscience and ACEs. And I think it's really allowed me to not only understand like the scientific side of people, but really the human person in general. And Alex, Kate, and I are all going to med school next year. And I think it will serve us very well in the future field. And then next is Olivia, our illustrator.
Hi, so I'm Olivia Shank. I'm a freshman in Howard Hall at Notre Dame right now, and I'm from Fishers, Indiana. I've never really done illustrations or anything before, so this was my first time for all of that, and then I hope to graduate with a degree in neuroscience in 2025.
Okay, so now we get to hear from Dr. Michael, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, resident neuroscientist. So this has been an incredible process. As a couple of people alluded to earlier in the call, this project started last fall of 2020, and most of it was created, right? So all this work was initiated in the midst of the pandemic, and most of the folks didn't get to meet each other until close to this project's completion. And as Alex said, I think that that's just a beautiful testament to kind of commitment and tenacity and resilience and the strength that we got through each other. Alex was saying last night about how sometimes it was a love-hate relationship or something like, but it's like, right, that there were times that this was not easy. But seeing it, I'm really surprised by how emotional I am actually this evening, seeing it in real life with all y'all here. So thank you. Yeah, so I'm Nancy Michael. Professionally, I'm the Director of Undergraduate Studies for the Neuroscience and Behavior major at Notre Dame. That's how I know all of these wonderful young people. Personally, I'm a wife and a mother of 2 amazing daughters. And my journey into neuroscience started a long time ago, but we won't start at the beginning, I promise. We'll start with grad school. I was a non-traditional student with almost a decade between undergrad and returning to school. And so during that time, I got married and I had my first daughter, and I was learning so much about the brain. My research focused on how hormones like estrogen changed brain and behavior. And I remember thinking about my adolescence and how helpful it would have been to know that it wasn't just my body that was changing, that I wasn't going crazy, but my brain was actually changing. I kept thinking, why doesn't everyone know this stuff? The more I learned about the way that the brain works and what the brain actually expects from its environment. All right, so we'll pause there. And that's right. The brain actually expects stuff from the environment to be able to grow up healthy. I kept wondering more and more, why doesn't everybody know this stuff? Like how many arguments between parents and teenagers could be avoided if we culturally or as caregivers just understood a little bit more about what was happening on the inside of our teens' brains? Or all those rules about early childhood development and all the things you're supposed to be doing with your kiddos and what you're not supposed to be doing with your kiddos? What if we just educated caregivers on what the brain expects and we could bypass all of that should to allow people to work within their capacity and with children's brain development to help them grow into the healthiest individuals possible? So through lots of community engagement and education over the years, They've learned also that it's not just me whose life can be changed by understanding what the brain expects, by letting all the grown-ups know that you weren't losing your minds when you were teenagers, like stuff was changing. It can make a difference in compassion and forgiveness for ourselves and for others. By talking with somebody about brain's expectations, for instance, about the needs for secure and consistent and caring affection, it can let us know that it was okay to feel hurt all those years ago and that we weren't being selfish, right? That while it might happen to everyone, we can ask a different question by understanding the brain's expectations, and we can begin to wonder, maybe it shouldn't, maybe we can do something differently. And so while trauma can be a loaded word, if you put stress in the context of the nervous system development, the opportunity for trauma really exists in the distance between the brain's expectation and an individual's experience. So traumas that existed before the pandemic have been exacerbated and certainly spread during the last 2 years. And even before COVID hit, adverse childhood experiences, as Asia talked about, also known as ACEs, were considered the greatest public health risk that no one was talking about. ACEs and traumatic stress are silent pandemics that are only growing. So especially in the light of reopening from the pandemic, understanding the brain's expectations really brings to the forefront that it's not just about reopening, but it really has to be intentionally about healing too. And so whether that's a different perspective with kids, more patience with a family member or ourselves, or just being kind to a stranger, understanding what the brain expects also allows us to work within our own strengths and skills and resources to take the best care of ourselves so that we can take the best care of the people in our lives. And that's the hope of not only this children's book, but also of Neuroscience, which is neuroscience, epigenetics, ACEs, and resilience, so all the literature associated with this, and delivering those resources through self-healing communities in general, is really to build community understanding of brain's expectations and environment so that we can all take better care of ourselves to be able to be the best caregivers for our community as we emerge from all of this. So I'll turn it back over to the authors. Thank you guys so much for being here and sharing this with us. If you guys want to give a little bit of a history of the book, yeah, thanks.
As Kate mentioned in the chat, this was originally supposed to be her part, but her Wi-Fi is cutting out, so we're not ignoring her. So this whole project grew out of that, both a philosophy and the science that Dr. Michael just shared last fall. So the fall, or I guess 2 falls ago, fall of 2020, we 3 had the pleasure of taking Dr. Michael's hallmark class, which is called Developmental Neuroscience, where we take that philosophy that she just shared and the science behind it and are sent off into the greater South Bend and Michiana community as little neuroscience consultants. And so we 3 were kind of out of a whim paired up with Velshana and the United Way of St. Joseph County and kind of asked, how can we give something to the community based on these 3.5 years of a neuroscience education at Notre Dame? What can we do with that? And so it started out with this pamphlet and a packet of how can we teach brain health, how can we teach neuroscience to caregivers to give to their kids or whoever is little in their life. And so that's how we spent the semester, and it covered a variety of topics. But as we were reflecting on the project, we had to present our project to Dr. Michael and Velshana as the final graded part of our class. But the grade was far from the most important part of that project. We realized that it was the stories that people connected with. That was something Velshana hit home over and over again, that when you're telling someone and explaining science to someone who maybe doesn't have a fancy accolade or a degree, you do it through a story, you give a metaphor. And we really just took that and ran with it and realized that using these stories could be a really captivating way to share what we know and what we've learned to people so that they can actually use it in their life. Because all of this awesome research is just that if it only stays in papers and books and databases that require logins. So that's what this was, that's where this came from. And it's really grown into so much more than that. And it's so important that we can engage with these topics with people from a young age so that they can learn, as Dr. Michael hinted at, that what's going on is not just some black box in a brain that we don't understand with these processes and fancy names, but it's happening to us every single day. These stress reactions have a biological basis that we can understand, we can learn from, and in a lot of ways we can control or learn to grow with. And so that's where this comes in and why it's so important. We're trying to bring neuroscience and in a way, science as a whole into people's lives. The past 2 years have been a case study on what science literacy or the lack thereof can do to a broader community on individual national levels. And so this project is one small way of trying to bring that to people and really emphasize the science of caregiving and how this wealth of research shows that it's those personal connections that can let a kid grow up, no matter what happened to them, with success, with resilience, and find those relationships. And really all the science shows is that it's that one connection to a parent, a teacher, a sibling, a mentor in their community. That's where the resilience is formed. So it grew into this book, and Rebecca is excited to share with you kind of the history of how we put the book together in its most recent form.
Yeah, well, I think what Alex said is a big part of it. We started out with a pamphlet and realized that words can only get you so far. And we definitely struggled on communicating the topics we wanted to communicate with just words. And I'm sure Valshana told us many times, like, add in pictures, like use stories. And we were like, okay. And then finally, we realized how important that was, and tried to do that with the pamphlet. But I think we realized that using a whole story and communicating everything just through a story would work even better. And I think something else we realized is we didn't only want to teach neuroscience to parents and caregivers and community organization leaders, but we thought it would be cool that kids could understand a bit more about their brains and bodies too. For that, we definitely got inspiration from Dr. Michael's kids. They helped us realize and taught us, because you forget when you get older what it feels like to be a kid, and how different emotions and feelings can be scary and overwhelming. And so we wanted to share neuroscience with everybody, kids and adults alike. And we definitely had so much help from other like children's book authors and editors, and just different people in community organizations and public health kind of helping us along the way to write the book. So it definitely was not a small group of people working on this, but we're thankful for that.
All right, so now you all are going to share the best part of the book. And we'll start with, let me pull it up. We'll start with Rebecca.
Okay. This is my favorite scene of the book, probably. And I don't want to give too much of it away, of course. But the reason I really like it is because learning to walk in the snow or sledding down a snow hill can become a metaphor for how we learn and build connections in the brain and how messages are sent in our brain. Basically, just like you can picture walking in the snow for the first time, you go so slowly, but then when you walk in other people's footsteps, you're able to move faster. Or the first time you sled down a hill and it's there are no paths, you go really slow, but once it's been iced over and passed, you go really fast. And that's kind of how our brain works. And so I thought that it's just a fun metaphor. And I think that anybody who's kind of experienced it can understand then how their brain is working better. And I think there's also an aspect of it, again, don't want to give away too much of the story, but Raphael gets to kind of lean on his sister a bit and walk in her footsteps, literally, in this scene. And so it just shows how important those older people in our communities are in helping our brains grow and develop. And next, Kate can talk about her favorite part.
Yeah, I will try my best. I'm sorry if the Wi-Fi cuts out again. It's been super choppy the whole time. But this is my favorite scene. It's where Raphael is kind of getting bullied a little bit by some of the other kids in the snowball fight, and he feels like his brain is on fire. He feels all fired up, and it's showing a depiction of his stress system being activated. And I like this picture a lot because it's such like a universal feeling that everyone has felt, like whether it's in class, a teacher made a kid feel stupid, or like as an adult, you receive criticism at work, or someone criticizes your kid, or you're like reading a text message and it's a negative tone of voice. Like everyone has had that experience where their stress system is activated and you feel it in your body before you even totally have sorted it out in your mind. And I think it's a helpful image for anyone of any age to be able to think of, like, to be able to say to yourself, oh, I'm just feeling fired up and I haven't cooled down yet. And just to be able to acknowledge that before you start to regulate has been extremely helpful for me. And I hope that it helps anyone who reads this book. And then I think Alex is next. Yeah.
Yes. And so this is my personal favorite story or illustration, and something that's so exciting about this book and having kind of gone through it together is, even though it was a collective effort, there was little things that each of us specifically contributed. If Rebecca hadn't brought up the sledding analogy, this whole project may have never got off the ground. That was early on in the fall in the pamphlet and really inspired a lot. And so in this scene, Raphael is looking out the window, seeing friends in a snowball fight, and something in our brain called mirror neurons are activated. And so mirror neurons is this amazing part of our physical and motion part of our brain that are actually activated both when we do something like throw a snowball and when we see someone else do that same thing, such as your friend or a parent throwing a snowball. And so we were able to visualize this through a little neuron up in the brain with a telescope, kind of looking out the eyes, seeing what's happening and representing that in the brain. And so that's just an analogy, a metaphor that stuck with me this whole time. And something that's exciting is, even though the final product was illustrated by Olivia, we all labored through our own drawings to start. And so I actually have the first version of the telescope still in my office. And so it's pretty exciting to see where this all came from. It's a long way away from a colored pencil drawing on my dorm room coffee table that I just scratched out in the middle of a meeting. So it's really exciting to see how it's all grown. And I believe Olivia, our wonderful illustrator, is next.
Yeah, so hi, thank you guys all for coming. I see a lot of like my past teachers and family members here, so thank you so much for being here. And with that, I chose the front cover because I really don't have a favorite scene, and I'll explain why. So when I was first interviewed for this position, one of the very first things that Belshana asked me was, so what knowledge of neuroscience do you have and could bring to this project? And I look at her and I go, Belshana, I have 2 weeks of general intro psychology under my belt. And she's like, is that all? And I go, well, no, I also recently took a psych exam. And she's like, well, how'd you do? And I'm like, I failed it. And then so that was the only neuroscience knowledge that I had. And so she didn't hang up on me. She kept talking to me. I thought she was just being polite. And she goes, so what illustrating experience do you have? And I look at her and I go, I have more experience and knowledge in neuroscience than I do even illustrating a book. And that's nothing. Like, I've never done any digital art before. I've never done anything. And so she's like, okay, I'm going to finish my other interviews. Like, I'll get back to you this weekend. So I'm like, okay, like, obviously you're not going to pick the most underqualified candidate to ever walk into your Zoom meeting. But I heard back from her and I was really surprised. And I ended up landing the position for reasons other than my evident lack of experiences. And regardless of what those reasons were, United Way, Self-Healing Communities, and everyone who worked on this book, they gave me a chance. And that to me is what my favorite part of the book is. It's not a singular scene, but rather the fact that this whole book is a chance. It's a chance to learn, it's a chance to teach, and it's a chance to do good. And I can easily say that I've learned more about the relevance of neuroscience from these authors, the children's book, Dr. Michael and Belshana, than I have learned from any of my general textbook classes thus far. And what good is knowledge if you do not understand the relevance to your community? And that's why I selected the front cover as my favorite scene, because it can be seen as so many different things, so many different chances, and so many just different opportunities to people who open it, whether it's a chance for students or parents to learn direct applications of neuroscience, a chance for biracial families to finally see representation inside classroom resources, or even a chance for a freshman with zero digital art experience who failed their first intro psychology exam to illustrate a neuroscience book. And this book is truly a chance for everyone who opens it. And with that being said, I'm gonna hand it over to someone with a few more decades of neuroscience experience than me, and that's going to be the amazing editor and advisor, Dr. Michael.
Thank you so much, Olivia. That was so beautiful. That was so beautiful. And you can clearly see that it was definitely, like, Olivia has done an amazing job, right? She's totally brought these ideas and this story to life through these incredible illustrations. My favorite part is the whole book, but I clearly love the second part of the book, the inside the brain part of the book, because I think as a bigger person, right? So one of these expectations of the brain is that the brain is obligated to look to older people for examples, right? So littler people are obligated neurobiologically, their brain is obligated to look to all of the older people in their world for examples of how to behave and how to treat people. And we can know that as those, right? Like I can know that with my education, and I can see that in the illustrations, but without unpacking that, there's not a great chance to invite other people to the conversation. And so one of the amazing things about the PACEs, right, that protective or the positive childhood experiences, the protective factors literature, is that the most powerful way to care for someone is to just show up for them. And so the best way to fix lots of things is to just show up for people, and that happens to be free. So we have throughout the back, there are lots of different resources for the reading partner. So we targeted the reading level of the book itself to an emerging reader level. So depending on your kiddo, first, second, third grade-ish, with the expectation that they're still having somebody read with them, and the hope that that reading partner will work through the story with the kiddos, as well as be curious and explore the resources in the back as well. And so those dive into much more of the function and the what's going on inside of the brain to build the knowledge base and skill and confidence of that reading partner. And so we go through chapter by chapter and try and unpack what's happening in the different illustrations and in the different chapters. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. We have a special gift for you all, and I'm going to show it to you. Let's see if I can. So Olivia and I, and the authors, this is the first time that they will actually get to see it. Olivia and I have been working on this together, and so this is pretty exciting to be able to show for the first time. So I'm just gonna let it sit for a minute. So awesome. So at the end of this session, we're gonna work on putting it into one document. We have some work to do with making it one file. I just asked for individual pictures so I can be able to show it. I did want her to sign, so you'll have an autographed picture from Olivia. And these are all of the concepts and ideas. And one of the things that I want to ask is that you think about printing 2 copies. Dr. Michael just talked about reading the back of the book, learning about the brain. One of the things that I'm hoping is that you take out the time to read the back so that you can color together and maybe have conversations about the things that you learned. And as you read the story, you can also reflect back on these topics that are brought up. The other thing that I want to share is that in the back of the book, there's also activities. You don't know what, oh, I'm sorry. This is one of my favorite, just by the way. You will get a wonderful kick out of what that whole thing tells you when you get the book. But I just want to encourage everybody to please consider, again, taking out time to read it for yourself so that when you're coloring alongside, you can have conversations. And to all of the Self-Healing Communities team, guess where we got this concept from? Anybody can think about it? Remember, I showed her the picture I took when we were all watching Encanto. And so this is a representation of all of us at that special event that Karina talked about. So we do have an email address, selfhealingcommunities@gmail.com. So you can email more questions. Most of you all should have received the email from that address. And at the bottom, you'll see a bunch of links that you can dive into to learn more about Self-Healing Communities. And yes, I'm just going to breathe it all in. All right, so now guess what you get to do? Go buy it. So Kate is going to drop the link into the chat, and it's sold at cost. Okay, it's sold at cost. We get no profits at this time. Okay, that might change. All right, so but the coloring book you'll get, we want you to share it. For our local community, we have purchased a set of about 300 books. It takes a while for us to get it here. So we have purchased some books that we are in partnership with the library to be able to give it out in every community. And our library has agreed to put it in circulation. So people who don't get the book for free, they will be able to check it out. So I'm really, really, really excited. My family is on this call, and boy, oh boy, they have been saying some stuff about the beautiful smile I have on my face. I said, that's being proud. I'm just so proud, because the one thing that Alex, Rebecca, and Kate did not talk about was the fact that I told them, go to the library with a blank piece of paper, don't write any words. And they were not happy about it. So I'm just so proud of everybody. That's my big sister, put that big old face in there, and my other sister, yeah, just know that. I feel the love, I feel the love. So what I would like to do is, if you have any questions, we have about 10 minutes. You can write it in the chat, or you can unmute. You can ask questions of the illustrator. Let me also say, Olivia, she didn't give herself as much credit. She blew us away with her samples before we did the interview. So as she was answering the questions, I'm like, but you have this. And her one answer that really got me is that she really took time to try to answer the self-care question. I do try to ask that in everything that we do. And if you don't know much about self-care, we try to make sure you learn it. So questions, any questions in the chat, or would you like to unmute? I don't mind.
What's the age group that was recommended to read the book?
Dr. Michael?
Yeah, so we tried to target the reading level as I know that there are lexile things. I don't know how that would match up, but an emerging reader, right? So a reader who is a little bit independent, but still doing a lot of reading with parents, or a younger reader who is just reading with a parent. So really, I think the story can be appropriate for anywhere from like 4 years old up to probably about 3rd or 4th grade, in terms of, right, depending on where you're to read with, or to have the child do the reading and the reading partner being with them.
But the information that's in there is all ages.
Right.
So
Yep.
especially that back portion. So now let me say this, if you have a child that you know has endured some trauma, stress in the family, lots of different things, the pandemic, I'm just saying, this is a fun book for all ages, because underneath the pictures, there's additional details that pull you into it. One of the things that I love about self-healing communities is that it really helps me personally understand what's happening inside of me at a given time. So it's like, okay, wait, I'm responding. Is this stress? Is this toxic stress? Like how little sleep have I had? How many things have happened in a day, right? So the more you learn about this, the more that you'll be able to be an amazing supporter in your community, for yourself first and then for others. There was a question about how long it takes to get to Michigan. So this is a distributor that is global. One of the things is that when you order it, they print it and distribute. So that's what takes a little bit longer. We don't have books just sitting to be sent out. And we went with this company because they work nicely with nonprofit organizations. Amazon would have probably been a little quicker, but their charges were quite different. And again, we wanted to have this at cost.
Well, I have a question. More in the chat.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Maria.
She wants us to cheer, and we will. That is
okay,
such
great.
a cool thing.
To the authors, what was a concept that you knew you wanted to communicate about neuroscience that you found the most difficult to turn into something that was storybook appropriate?
I'll go first. The oxytocin dopamine connection, and how important that is, and how key that is to attachment bonds, and how attachment bonds are everything about resilience and healing. But yeah, I found that to be the most difficult to explain in words. I actually found it easier to do in the picture because, well, you'll see when you read the book. But Dr. Michael helped us a lot with that.
Rebecca or Alex, was there anything else?
I think just in general, when we were writing, especially the end matter, it kept getting so long, and we were like, everything's interconnected, and we just wanted to like keep adding more detail. And so I guess that's not one topic, but it was hard to limit ourselves, and yeah, hard to decide when we had to stop writing and talking.
Yeah, I think there was a variety of concepts that were difficult. I think something that we found difficult is like we had at the time of writing this, and especially throughout like the end matter, which was how we always reference the inside the brain. It didn't get the fun name until maybe like January. So that's what the end matter means. That's like the explanation part of it at the end. And we kept running into, and this was where Velshana was so helpful to really push us, is trying to take concepts that we learned out of textbooks in an academic setting for 4 years and explain them in a way that you can give this to a 10-year-old and they have a fighting chance at understanding it themselves. Because so many of these concepts have textbooks and textbooks written on them, just the simple idea of memory. You take your introductory psych class in high school and they'll teach you 15 different representations of memory. So how can we teach that in a picture or a paragraph, let alone at a 6th grade level or younger? So I don't know if I have a specific concept that was hard, but this whole idea of taking us outside of the classroom, taking off our neuroscience hats and actually writing something that was accessible was incredibly difficult, but the most important part of the story. And Velshana's little story about sending us to the library is funny. Those of you know me well know that I am a color inside the lines kind of kid, and Velshana didn't even give us lines, just said color. And there was, I'm seeing some laughs on the screen because those, if you nodded, you know. And that was incredibly stressful for me and for the rest of us. And so that's just a representation of how this pushed us so far out of our comfort zone in so many ways. But it was so important that we did.
All right. I think there's no other questions. And I did hear, I saw Professor McKenna. I miss you. She said, let's unmute and cheer. That is such a Nicole Williams thing. So we can unmute. Yeah.
Oh yeah!
Great!
Way to go, Fred!